A year ago, I was talking about the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster. And my observation, based on my 20 years in the oil industry, working with a company called Schlumberger, that it was a contrived event. Now, that DVD of that presentation has been available on Amazon since September of last year. Amazon managed to bury it, so that even if you put Ian Crane, BP, into Amazon's own search engine, you couldn't find the DVD. It took me until February to eventually get Amazon to hook it into their search engine so that it could be found. Well, the reason it's been buried, of course, is because part of that presentation was that I actually identified the individual that was put on the rig to make it happen. And I explained how he was put on the rig, how he made it happen, and, basically, obviously, if I'm wrong, BP and the individual concerned should be suing me for libel. It wasn't either of these guys, by the way. Ronald Sepulvado was the very experienced BP company man that was moved from the rig on April the 16th, and he was replaced by this guy, Bob Kaluza, a very inexperienced BP company man. And in this presentation a year ago, I made the observation that BP had removed all photographs of the two company men on the rig at the time the well blew, Bob Kaluza and Donald Verdreen. And you cannot find anything about Bob Kaluza on the web. So, this should be your first clue. So BP are literally hoping that no attention is drawn to Bob Kaluza. Now, one of my fellow researchers in the US has set up a Facebook page trying to raise awareness of the significance of Bob Kaluza. But people in the Gulf Coast have got many, many other issues that they need to be focused on. And since the presentation a year ago, I came across a piece of video footage from the hearing in the Senate, which is prima facie evidence that the US is a corporatist state. And of course, corporatist state is another way of saying fascist state. So let me just show you this clip. This actually occurred about 3 weeks before the symposium last year, but I hadn't seen it by then. But this is very, very important.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the Judiciary Committee be discharged of S-3462, a bill to provide subpoena power to the National Commission on the British petroleum oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and that the Senate then proceed to its consideration.
Is there objection?
On behalf of other members of the Republican conference, I object.
Objection is heard.
Madam President?
Senator from New Hampshire.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 442 H.R. 5481, a bill to give subpoena power to the National Commission on the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill and offshore drilling, that the bill be read a third time and passed, and the motion to consider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate. This is legislation that passed the House 420 to 1.
Is there objection?
On behalf of other members of the Republican conference, I object.
The objection is heard.
Madam President,
the Senator from New Hampshire.
I don't understand what is so objectionable. In the House, 169 Republicans voted in favor of giving the Presidential Commission subpoena power. They understand how important that is, because this commission begins their investigation in the next few weeks. This should not be a partisan issue. I don't understand why my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are turning this into a partisan issue. I find it unbelievable that after everything the people of the Gulf region have endured and that this entire country has witnessed for over 2 months now, that anyone is still standing with the oil company that caused this disaster instead of the victims who are suffering from it.
I hope the American people understand that this is a clear contrast between who stands on your side and who stands on the side of special interests. How is it possible that members of this chamber find it difficult when the House of Representatives, in a near unanimous vote, could say that the subpoena power is necessary for the Commission to be able to get to the bottom of what happened? could pass unanimously there, save for one vote, and yet cannot even proceed here. Cannot even proceed here. This isn't rocket science. It's common sense to most Americans. We need to fully learn the lessons of this disaster with a thorough investigation, not protect oil companies from having their negligence exposed. We need to get answers from BP and Transocean and Halliburton and everyone else, including the federal agencies. Not give apologies to them, as I have seen Republicans suggest that we should apologize to BP for making sure that the residents of the Gulf region are held whole. We need to know the truth, and the Commission needs subpoena power to get the truth. So who are you protecting? And what are we hiding here?
What this is, it is the Senate. And what you saw there was one of the members of the Senate asking the Senate to give the BP hearing, the Gulf Coast hearing, the presidential hearing, the power subpoena to demand that the likes of Bob Kaluza and Donald Verdreen turn up to give their evidence, because Bob Kaluza has pleaded the Fifth Amendment, which means that any evidence he may give may be self-incriminating. So he has elected not to appear. Donald Verdreen has declared himself to be sick and unable to give evidence. So neither of these individuals, Bob Kaluza or Donald Verdreen, have given evidence to the Gulf Coast hearing and never will. Because in this Senate vote, the Republican Party shut down and blocked the power subpoena to the Gulf Coast hearing, thereby preventing the Gulf Coast hearing from ever establishing the truth behind what really occurred on the BP Deepwater Horizon. Okay, I showed this slide last year because a particular individual had made the recommendation on US TV that one of the ways in which perhaps the BP well could be shut down was by nuking it. Now, this is completely outrageous. It had only ever been done once before in Russia, I think it was 1973, with a gas well, and they're still paying the price to this day. So I made the observation last year that this was completely outrageous, and thankfully, it wasn't followed up. But the guy who made this recommendation was a guy called Matthew Simmons. Now, Matthew Simmons and I haven't exactly seen eye to eye over the years, because Matthew Simmons is was one of the prime movers behind the whole peak oil hypothesis. But in 2008, when the price of oil went up to $147 and then quickly dived, I think Matthew Simmons realized that the whole peak oil construct was nothing more than a sort of political maneuver to raise the prices of oil. So Matt Simmons actually left the oil industry, left investment banking, and set up his own company, a company called Ocean Energy Institute. And the prime purpose of Ocean Energy Institute was to set up wind farms off the coast of Maine. And his goal was to have Maine's electricity all generated from wind by the year 2020. On the day that I was giving this presentation last year, the Gulf of Mexico had been cleared of all shipping because there was a tropical storm supposedly on its way. And before any of the shipping could be returned to the Gulf, BP announced that they'd managed to cap the well. Well, Matthew Simmons actually came up with something very, very interesting. Matt spotted that the live feed from the camera, the underwater camera, had changed. Prior to the shipping being cleared, the Lambda coordinates, which is effectively the underwater GPS coordinates of the well, this is the well that was spewing oil, had changed. And they were no longer these coordinates. Sorry, it's the other way around. This is the well that was spewing oil, and these were the coordinates that were on the camera prior to July 23rd. But afterwards, the camera was supposedly showing a well that had stopped spewing oil, but the coordinates had changed. So Matt Simmons went on US television and said, look, another lie from BP, another lie from the federal government. They haven't shut this well down. It's still spewing oil. And he was extremely vocal on this particular issue for about 2 weeks, because then, tragically, he was in his hot tub, 67 years of age, no history of ill health, and he was sitting in his hot tub in Maine, and he was found by his family, and he supposedly had a heart attack. So consequently, you know, one of the most vociferous critics of BP and the federal government in the US with an oil industry background was no longer a problem. Matt Simmons made the observation that this Gulf of Mexico disaster was indeed a population reduction event, which of course is exactly the same observation I made, and the title of the DVD from last year is BP, Population Reduction and the End of an Age. Well, it gets worse, because take a look at this.
The plume is actually disappearing. The plume is being biodegraded, that there is a new form of microbiology that is attacking this plume and using it as a food source. Just to bring it back to the... Sorry. Thanks, guys. Here.
Okay. Thank you.
That's Mike Utzler in the green shirt there. He's the chief operating officer with BP. And what he's saying to Stephen Fry there, which I think was for a Channel 4 or BBC documentary that was broadcast last year, what he was making the observation to Stephen Fry was he said, we, BP, have introduced genetically modified microbiology as part of the cleanup operation. So now what you've got is a soup, a toxic soup of oil, Corexit, which is extremely toxic as a dispersant. It's 10 times more toxic than oil. It was used to submerge the slick, coupled with microbiology, genetically modified microbiology. There are researchers in the Gulf of Mexico who have nicknamed the illness that is manifesting there blue plague, BP, blue plague. And this is attacking people. It is reached the point of horizontal gene transfer. It's moving now across species. It's a real problem.